All right, here we are back at video number 4 in our series here for photo retouching. I know these videos are kind of long, but I'm not going to apologize because they need to be long because we got to cover a lot of stuff here in this particular one. And I didn't really want to break it up in part one and part two with the lecture. So here we are. What we're going to look at now is smoothing the skin out. Now, this picture that I got here is going to be part of the package. I know it's not there in Blackboard when you looked at it probably earlier today, but it will be here this afternoon and it'll be uploaded so you have these files to kind of work off of and practice that I've been showing you, with the exception of the one for Kimberly. I told you why about that one. So, mottling, or it's basically if you ever hear that term where you got mottled skin or mottled skin with T's, Mottled. I think that's how it's spelled, but in any case, the idea of it is that under the hot lights of a photo studio, or under the hot natural lights of the day, when a model or someone is posing in a particular position, sometimes their skin, depending on their skin color and their skin tone, it gets kind of patchy or blotchy in different areas of their skin, usually those who are less melanated than others. For instance, this picture here, if you look at her face looks kind of neutral, but if you look at the neck, you look at the shoulder where her hand is, you can see the kind of the coloration is a little different. And that's kind of a small version of what I'm talking about. This picture is kind of a low resolution picture. Couple ways to be able to tell that besides going to image and image size, like I've been doing, where you can look at the resolution, 72 pixel per inch. It's only 12 by 9, so it's kind of a small picture. At that size, at that resolution, you only got, a few hundred pixels that make up this whole picture. So there's not a lot here. Another way to be able to look at that information without having to go image to image size, down in the bottom, lower left-hand corner of the picture, in that bottom section there, it'll show you width, height, and resolution of the picture. That's called the documents. Hold on, I'll tell you which one it is. That's the document dimensions. If you hit this little drop down arrow that sits right there, you can change up to all these particular sets of information. So I think document size or profile is what's there by default, which is cool. The document size will show you what the file size of this image, this entire image is, with the second number. The first number is the file size of that one layer. But that really doesn't give you a lot of information. So I always like to put it to document dimensions because at least it'll tell me the resolution number. If nothing else is, something I understand. All right. Now, the idea of smoothing out the skin in a low resolution format like this, or just a quick and dirty version of doing this, is you're just blurring the details in the skin. So patchiness of the skin. Also things like blemishes, acne bumps, freckles, some wrinkles that are not way too deep. Anything like that, you want to try to get rid of that by doing a smooth skin effect. Now, the idea of it is that you're blurring. So in the past, this is what we used to do. Still works to this day. It's duplicating the layer of the original, and that duplicate, because we didn't have protected layers back then, we would go to filter, we would go down here to blur, and we would choose this thing called Gaussian blur, which is the blurring filter. It's the kind of general one that kind of works all day, every day. Depending on how high we go with the radius of that blur filter, depends on what we get as the final result. What you're aiming at is not necessarily the number you set at this radius, it's looking at your image and looking at the skin and seeing how smoother it gets, color wise, texture wise. So there is a checkbox for preview. There is a preview window also in this filter where you can move to a certain section of the picture at 100% zoom. If you're not looking at your picture at 100% of its zoom percentage, it's a good idea to get to that if you can. You still got the ability to use the keyboard shortcuts, control with plus and minus to zoom in and out, or do fit on screen or any of that type of stuff if you want to. But I would always look at your picture when you're doing this at 100%. If you got a higher resolution image, this is going to be a better result than a lower resolution image. But whatever number that you come up with, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you can blur the skin tone out without getting rid of too many details within the picture. So what number you end up landing at is not really important. What's more important is, does the skin look smoother, that porcelain doll kind of thing? Um, are you losing skin texture? That's the biggest thing while you're trying to smooth the skin tone out. So you'll come up with a number. All right. You'll hit OK. That takes care of that part of it. Now, the second part is doing a layer mask. Now, the idea of the masking is those areas like the hair, the eyes, the eyebrows, right along the nose, especially the bottom part of the nose, the lips, the little Cupid's bow area there within the lips, the ring, her outfit that she has on, even her fingers to an extent, like the nails. Those areas are supposed to be clear, meaning they're not supposed to be blurry. They're supposed to be sharper. So you have to do layer masking. So I would go in and create a layer mask on that layer. And then I would use my paintbrush, again, going through the whole process. Soft round brush. If you need to, you can go to the brush settings and turn the spacing of it down to the 10%. I had to restart my computer, so everything kind of reset itself. That something went wrong and goofy. Anyway, um, paint with black as your top color. You could change the opacity around up there in the options bar. And again, you can use the square bracket keys to increase or decrease the size. But what you would do is paint away at different percentages, different opacity percentages at different areas that are supposed to be sharper. So, like the hair, I'd probably paint that in at 100%. But our eyes, I would start at 50%. So this way, with that soft brush, if I paint more and more over the same area with a smaller and smaller soft edge brush, it'll get to 100%. But like the eyelashes, the eyebrows, those I'd probably bring back to 50% because I want some of that, area underneath the hair to still be blurry. But I want the eyes to sharpen up, if not at 100%, somewhere close to that. Ridge of the nose, the bottom area of the nose, be able to mask that back in and out. Am I painting with black? Yes. Painting at high opacity, 100%. I'm just making sure everything is set like it needs to. The lips, that's another one you probably won't bring 100% back in. But again, more and more, whatever your percentage that you got set with that opacity, you're painting with that much in at a time. So you want to paint these particular areas in the ears and earlobes, eyes, the ridge right around the chin to sharpen that up. Again, doesn't have to be at 100% because that may look kind of off and weird looking, especially when everything around it is not at 100%. But then, like the hair, you would carefully try to paint that back in at 100%, at least around the outside edges of the hair. Probably when you get closer towards the face and head, you could lower that percentage down to be less. So you bring in less of that back and restoring less of that back in. But these areas that are supposed to be sharp and clean, you want to make them sharp and clean. And then what you would do is every once in a while, you would turn the visibility on that particular layer on and off to kind of see and track your results, to see if you're doing it and doing it correctly. Now, that was the way we used to do it back in the day. It still works, especially for low resolution images. Now, another way of making that same thing happen, you would make a duplicate layer using the blur effect. I would right click on that layer and make it into a smart object. Converting it into a smart object is going to allow you to apply a filter like that blur filter if you want to, the Gaussian blur filter, without it being destructive, meaning you can go back and forth and change it. Another blur filter that you can use, which to me is a little bit better, is this one called Smart Blur. The Smart Blur unlike the Gaussian blur, has a few more options in it that you can access. And these options can tend to make the blurring effect look a little better. Um, Now, first thing is the quality. I would turn the quality level up to high, um, even on a low resolution image, because the blurring effect will look a little bit better. You could probably see in the preview window a little bit better than your actual picture in this particular case. Where as you click and drag to move it around, it'll show you the actual picture without the blur. Then when you let go, you'll see it with the blur. The smart blur effect, once you change the quality to high, you would play with this threshold and this radius number. Depending on how you want to apply this, depend on which way that you do it. I usually turn the threshold all the way down, and then I start playing around with the radius value. It goes from 0 to 100. So if I put that radius at 50, for instance, what that radius is doing is taking from the center of every pixel and radiating out the blur effect. Okay, so you're getting a blurrier and blurrier picture with the higher you go with that radius number. But then the threshold allows you to kind of throttle it back a little bit. All right, but in a very unique way. So instead of the threshold, and again, this goes from 0 to 100 as well. I probably wouldn't put it at 50 because that's really blurring it up by a lot. But if you turn the threshold up, even at gradual numbers, and you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to kind of nudge it up a little bit at a time, which may help in this process. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with a particular threshold number value. What it is, again, depends on everything, and you'll just gradually increase it until you get the skin to flatten out like you want it to be. That mottling that I was talking about will tend to go away and things like that. But the thing you want to be careful about with this smart blur, the way that it's supposed to work, it is supposed to keep the areas that's supposed to be sharp, like the lips, like the ridge of the nose, like the eyes that I was talking about with the masking. It's supposed to keep those sharper, the hair and things like that. It's supposed to keep the details in there. It doesn't always work, so you got to. That's why you got to be careful where you put the numbers for the threshold and the radius. Um, but what you're supposed should be able to do is go around the whole picture and look around at it and see how it looks. You want it to have a smoother skin tone, but you don't want to have it where it looks artificial. And you can almost tell the artificiality of it because the picture will start to look like it's a painting more than a photo. And that's telling you that either your threshold or your radius is too high. And you would probably want to drop one of those down. Like I'm dropping down the radius value and seeing what I get from there. Uh, and if the threshold number that I'm dropping down is not enough, you could drop the radius number value. And again, your aim is, well, your aim is what your aim is, because if I was going for that painted look, I would bring the radius and the threshold up a little higher. If your aim is just to try to smooth out the skin using something other than Gaussian blur, then you want to kind of see what you can do with these numbers here. And no one will be able to tell you what's the best thing to do for every situation, because every type of picture is going to be different. The resolution, physical size, subject matter of the picture itself, all those things factor into what happens with these particular numbers. Now the mode is really not, you're really not going to change that, because if you change it, you can kind of see the craziness that happens with this overlay edge or this edge only. I don't see what that is for, because that looks weird and it's just way too electrified looking and crazy. I just leave it to normal for the mode. Now we hit OK. It's going to give us our smart blur effect. You may have to give your computer, like mine, that gets slow, a second or two for it to apply. Once it applies, because you did it to the protected layer, you can easily turn that layers effect on and off to kind of see before and after, where you can kind of look at it and see what goes on. And again, my computer is slow, so it doesn't do it kind of immediately. The eyes and hair and things like that are a lot sharper on the smart blur than it is on the Gaussian blur, but still, if you need to push it a little bit further, you do have this smart filter mask, the smart filter mask here. That's what this should say. Instead of smart filters, it should just say filter mask or something like that, where you can paint on it again with shades of gray to paint more of that effect out, like around the hair. I would probably paint more of that effect a little more out in a way than any other little places or spaces or whatever. But also like in the face, like the eyes, especially paint the blurring effect away as close as you can, right to the eyeballs and that sort of thing. Just so you can make those sharp areas, appear a little bit better. And just it's just another version of the masking. It's just applying the mask to the filter instead of to the entire blurred out layer like I had before. Now, which one is going to be better? Neither one. It's a matter of personal preference based on the picture that you're working with. But low resolution images that's at like 150 pixel per inch or lower, I would say physical size is not that big. You're probably using it for the internet more for that image, and you don't need to worry about the quality is high because it could be just a thumbnail picture or a gallery picture that you're using, or it's just something that's not as important. You could probably get away with doing this blurring effect, either the Gaussian blur, the smart blur. I would say apply them both as the smart object and see which one works better for you as the result. And you'll like or not like the different results, but that would be something to try to do. Now, next thing. Uh, oh, by the way, before somebody asks, the flyaways on her hair, because she kind of got the Beyonce hair, like she's probably standing in front of a fan. So you got the Beyonce hair thing going on. These little wisp of hair, that's what the remove tool is good for. To try to go along each one of these strands of the hair and use the with the remove tool and see if you can knock those out. And most times you're going to be successful in a better resolution image than this. So now let's look at a better resolution image and let's look at doing the frequency separation, because frequency separation is a little more involved with the steps. It's not a quick and fast thing until you practice with it enough for you to be able to work it. Um, there's going to be some math involved, so be prepared for that, and some science with everything. Um, there is, and I'll make a link to it in there so that way you have it. There is a YouTube channel, the Jesus Ramirez with the Photoshop training channel, and then one with Aaron Nace with Flern. I'll find those two and link both of them so you can see what frequency separation is and how they explain it to do it. I'm going to show you the way that Aaron Nace showed me how to do it when I learned it through him. Um, Everybody's a little different with some of the application of this, but the basics are still the same. The foundation is still the same. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start with a higher resolution image. The higher the resolution, the better the quality of the picture, the more that this effect is going to be effective, where you'll actually see the results and see what is going on. So this has a resolution of 240, much higher than the 72. So that's the main thing. If you want to look at this image at 100% zoom, Command Alt or Command Option and 0 or Control Alt 0 will, bring it at 100% zoom. Her hair, she's got the silk, the Hawaiian silky hair going on. She's got, the clean looking face. If you look at the shoulder, because the light is hitting right there on the shoulder, this is that idea of that patchiness or the mottling that I was talking about. See how there's some discoloration in the skin there. If you go and look at her face, uh, forehead, looking at her forehead, there's a little bit of patchiness there in the forehead and a little bit there because of the light hitting right here on this part of the eye. That part of the cheek there is a little redder than say on the other side and stuff like that. So these are kind of the things you want to kind of even out to make the skin tone look a little smoother. Okay. But then when it comes to things like the pores that are showing up on her face, you don't want to get rid of that. Maybe this little blemish that's right here on her cheek, right there below her eye. There may be one or two other little blemishes that you may see. To get rid of those blemishes, that's taking the texture and adjusting for the texture. But sometimes when you're using this remove tool or the the patch tools or the healing brush tools that I've been showing you, sometimes it takes away not only the skin texture, but the color too gets affected, the skin color. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the skin texture from the skin color. And it's just a step. It's just a set of steps called frequency separation. So that's what you're looking up if you're going to look this up on your own. And like I said, Aaron Nace with Flern and Jesus Ramirez with Photoshop Training Channel has some great YouTube content, and one of them is the frequency separation. Probably one of the best two that I would show you. All right, so here's the process. We're going to be making a new layer. Well, not a new layer. We're going to make a new duplicate layer. So I'm going to make one duplicated layer, and this one's going to be called high frequency. This is the texture. Okay. So the high frequency layer is going to be, we're going to over sharpen this thing to bring that texture out more. So this way, what will happen is that the hair will have a little more detail and shine to it. The details within the eyes, within that necklace she has on, and the lips will increase. Normally to do this step, it's a version of sharpening the picture. So you have a good picture that's already in pretty good focus, but you want to give it that little extra, punch of extra sharpness without doing that high dynamic range, the HDR output. You're doing this just to make it look just that little bit extra sharpness, which is an increase in contrast, which makes it look a little bit better. But you're just trying not to go down the HDR road with this. You're just trying to get simpler application. So high frequency separation. We're doing the high frequency layer here. Now you do have the option on this one to convert this over to a smart object, and I would suggest that you do that before you apply this filter. On that layer, you're going to go to your view menu. You're going to go down to, not view, stupid. You're going to go to your filter menu. You're going to go down to other, and you're going to choose high pass. Now this high pass filter, this one is a unique animal because most people don't know what in the world this thing is doing. And really, the science behind it is very involved, and I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole with it. But essentially, what you're doing with this is you're trying to show the different highlights of the picture. Depending on where you go with the radius, all right, it's going to start off, if you start the radius off at 0 or as close to 0 as possible, you're going to get a big gray mass. But as you increase the radius value, and I'm using my arrow keys to do this a little bit at a time, you're going to start seeing the bright highlights of the picture show up, within that fog of the gray. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get this up as to a number that you're satisfied with. You're not trying to see every detail in the picture. You're just trying to make out the main details. So like her face, her eyes, her hair, texture in her hair, her necklace, the edge of her shoulder to the background, things like that. You want to try to get to that particular point where you're just barely seeing the picture. Okay. This is the point where you stop. This is the point where you hit OK. And this is the point where you start questioning your what in the world what's going on. So what is happening is this. You have on that layer created an image that is giving you just the highlights of the picture. By increasing those highlight values, you will increase the sharpness of the picture. Now, to show you how this works, so you could see it actually apply, you change the blend mode of the entire layer to either linear light, vivid light. You can use overlay if you want to, but linear and vivid light is probably going to give you the best choices. Now, are you going to see a big, huge difference between the two? Not really. You'll see a slight difference. Like if you look at the hair, in my linear light, the hair looks like it's a little shinier, a little brighter. Overlay doesn't look like it does much to the picture as far as linear or vivid light does. Pin lights, really haven't seen much of a difference with that one. I'm going to go with linear light. That's usually the default or the one that you would go with. But experiment, see what you get because sometimes you get a little bit different look to it. And you could test it out by turning the visibility of that that high frequency layer, turn the visibility of it on and off. You'll see what the picture looked like before when you turn it off. And when you turn it back on, you'll see how the sharpness of the picture increased. So that's one way to do that sharpening effect without using that unsharp mask filter or any of the other sharpening filters that are here. This is kind of the preferred way, the quote unquote professional way. And I say it with quotes because it's not really the professional way. It's just the way that most of the Photoshop professionals would choose to use instead of using the built in filters. And you get close to the same results without the extra work, of trying to figure out how to get the numbers to line up what you want. This works pretty easy. All right, so once you do that, that layer is done. Now, what you're going to do is go back to the background layer, and you're going to make another duplicate layer that's going to be called low frequency. This is the tech. This is the color of the skin. So low frequency. As a matter of fact, uh, skin tone. Skin tone is better than skin color. And then for this one for high frequency, this is the skin texture. All right. Now, this is an optional thing to do. It's kind of a quick way to be able to test after you do this next thing, be able to check and see if you've applied this correctly. You can group layers together into a folder, and then that folder you can then turn that whole folder on and off, and it'll take the contents and turn them on and off, so you can kind of see what the result will be. So if you want to do that, you would select the multiple layers, holding down Shift, select the multiple layers together, or Control would do it too. And then at the bottom of the layers panel, you have that little folder icon, which you can create a group out of whatever you got selected. And then the group you can I Quency separation. And don't ask me to spell separation because I always do it wrong. And there's no spell check. The folder, you can click on that little icon, that little tab next to it, and it'll open up so that way you can see the different layers. Now, what's good about this is that you can compare the original picture with what you did with the high frequency separation by simply clicking onto that folder icon, the folder and it will turn the visibility of all the layers inside of that folder on and off. All right, so that way you can go back and forth between the two. Now, what we're about to do is take this low frequency layer and blur the whole thing up with Gaussian blur. How much are you going to blur it by? Same guidelines I talked about before. You're trying to smooth the skin out a little bit, but you're not trying to lose a lot of detail. So while I'm going to lose some detail in the hair, I'm not going to I'm not really concerned about that. I'm trying to be concerned about the skin tone in the shoulder, in the cheek, in the forehead, trying to even out or smooth out a little bit. Now, I turned the visibility off of that high frequency layer because I don't need it to be on right now while I'm doing this. I cannot protect this low frequency layer. So if you mess these steps up that I'm about to go through with the Gaussian blur and things like that, and what happens after that, you basically got to start all over with a new low frequency layer because you won't be able to undo because there'll be too many undos to go back, and you might as well just throw it away and start over. All right. So get started. I will go to filter, go to blur, and go to Gaussian blur. Could you do the smart blur? Probably. I just never tried it with the smart blur or any of these other blurring effects. I just always went to Gaussian blur because it worked, and why change, around. But yeah, you could probably go with one of the other blurs if you want to, like the smart blur especially. Now, just like I did before with the Gaussian blur, I'm taking the radius number and I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge it up by a little bit at a time. I'm not concerned with how blurry everything, like the detail in parts of the image are going. I'm looking at their skin. I'm looking specifically at her shoulder. And I'm increasing this number, all right, as high as I could possibly get it, that blurs up that skin tone to where I can see it smoothing out. Now, it's not going to be perfect, all right, because that's not what the purpose of this is. You're just trying to blur it up where you can get as much in the cheek, the forehead, the shoulder blurred up to where you can get something that is working. This is where the problem starts to come into play, because what you want to do is blur this up, but you don't want to go real high with the numbers, because if you go too high with the number, that's going to get too blurry, and comparing it to the original picture, it's going to be ruined. But let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. So if I go up to this 6.2, hit OK, and then if I turn on the visibility of the high frequency layer, I should see what I had with the original picture. And if it looks blurrier right now, that means you went too high with the Gaussian blur. So I'm going to say that again. You apply this Gaussian blur with too high a number, and you hit OK. When you turn the visibility on to the high frequency layer, which sharpens things up, it should look like what your original picture did as far as how clear. And this is why the folder is important, because if I turn the visibility of that folder on and off, it turns both of those layers on and off. So that way I can see what the original picture looked like versus the new one. And if the new two sets of two pictures look real super blurry, you've gone too far with that low frequency one. And it's, if you can go back in your history and before you apply that Gaussian blur, yep, right there. If you can find it in your history panel, you can go back to right before you applied the Gaussian blur and go to that one step before and go apply the Gaussian blur again at lower numbers. So that way you can kind of start the process again. So I would go back to filter, I would go back to blur, I would go back to Gaussian blur, and instead of at the 6.2, I'd probably bring it down to a 4. Usually on a picture like this, somewhere within the 3 or 4 range is probably what you'll go with. You just want to slightly blur it up to where you're smoothing out the skin, but just again, don't go way too high. Trying to get everything to happen at one time. It's not going to be that way. So usually, somewhere less than 3 on this picture works good, because then it's not that big of a difference when you turn the visibility on or off on that group layer. That group, that you don't really see that big of a difference between the two pictures, because that's what you're aiming for right now. All right, that part of the complication is done. Now let's talk about the next part of the complication. The next part of the complication is you're going to do that Gaussian blur again, but you're going to do it in different areas, a little bit at a time. So what you're going to end up doing is using your lasso tool, the regular rope lasso, to lasso around different areas. Now, previous talking today, previous videos, talked about using the lasso tool and lassoing around an area, and then going into that quick mask mode, hitting the letter Q to kind of see what you do and do not have selected, right? And going to double click onto the little icon down there in the toolbox to change what's masked, what's selected, what the visibility, what the opacity is, and what the color is. If you remember me talking about that, I think in the first video, you want to be using this process, because what we're trying to do is see how much of the edges here are feathered. So we want to feather the edge, but we got to figure out by how much. This is where the math comes in. Let me get out of the quick mask mode here, get back to the marching ants. What I want to do is go to select, go to modify, go to feather, and put in a very high number, like 50, 60, something like that. But remember what number you put in, because you want this to be really blurry around the edges. So this way, this Gaussian blur filter that we're going to apply, it blends in with everything that's surrounding it. the surrounding areas. Um, there's a method to the madness, so bear with me here on this. So you put in a number. I'm gonna start with 50, right? Hit OK. It's gonna blur that by 50 pixels. When I hit the letter Q on the keyboard, I can see how much that 50 pixel blur is. If I'm happy with that number, I stop. If I'm not happy with that number, I want it to blur up some more, then I would just go right back to select. I would go back to modify. I would go back to feather, and I'd put in a different value, whatever it is. Let's say I want to add another 30 to that. So now I'm up to 80. 50 plus 30 equals 80 pixels. That's how much the blur is by. Again, hit the letter Q, and this is looking pretty good. All right. So 80 pixels is what I need. That's my magic number for this. Let me hit the letter Q to get out of this and then deselect those marching ants. Now, once you get to that number, what do you do with it? Up here in the options bar for your lasso tool, you have a feather amount by however many pixels. This way I can put in this number, 80 pixel. I can put in this number, 80 pixels. That was weird. All right, you can put in 80 pixels for the number here, so that way every time you use this lasso tool in different area in different parts, it's always going to give you that 80 pixel feather, no matter how big or small of an area that you select, you're always going to get that number. Now you want to make sure that you're on your first one of your modifier buttons for making a new selection, so that way when you go to a new spot, you'll make a new selection and make the other one, previous one, disappear. But it's always going to give you that 80 pixel blur. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because of what you're about to do next. Now, if you get this setup done, it's going to make the next part easy or easier. I want to start with a shoulder. I want to select an area. It doesn't have to be super huge, but I just want to select an area that's going to have that blur of 80 pixel. And that on this low frequency layer, I want to use that to kind of blend the skin tone in some more. So this bright light spot that's right here is going to be a lot smoother and it's going to blend in with the rest of her skin tone color. So I will be doing filter. I'll be going to blur, and I'll be using Gaussian blur. Again, you could probably use smart blur, but Gaussian blur just has a simpler interface to work with, just moving that one radius number. All right. The higher you go with the radius, the blurrier and blurrier that area is going to get. You're going to get it to a particular point where you'll see how that color kind of flattens and smooths out. And the surrounding areas are going to kind of do that as well. It's kind of flatten and smooth out as well. You don't want to go too high. If you go too high with the number, you're going to see everything kind of darken all of a sudden and kind of get this darkened area. That means that you went too high with the number, and you want to reverse that. Just step it back down. It doesn't have to be super high. You could come up with a value number, like in this case, probably a 75 or something like that could work. And I could say every time I use this Gaussian blur, I'm going to do it at 75 pixel for the radius, regardless of what happens here. And then you hit OK, and that applies to there. And then you go and select another area overlapping the previous one. And then you can go to filter, you can go to blur, you can go to Gaussian blur. You can keep it to that 75 pixel number, or you could change the number value because you got a new place, a new spot, and hit OK when you get satisfied, and you'll have that. Now, little tricks, because this part is kind of fun. Controller Command and the letter H on your keyboard will hide your extra things. It says hide extras. That's the name of it. If you're on a Macintosh computer, when you do Command H, the first time you ever do it, it's thinking you're trying to do a command within the operating system of Mac. So Photoshop will pop up and be like, hey, do you mean to hide extras, or do you mean to do the Macintosh thing? Tell it that you want to do hide extras, so that way every time you do Command H, it applies this. Now, what it's done, it's hidden the marching ants. They're still there, all right? They're still right where I had them. It's just right now I don't see them. Okay. And then Command H will bring them back. All right. This will help you get things to blend better. So watch this. If I make this selection and don't try to go over her skin, like past her skin, past her body or whatever, just go right within the skin tone area. Don't worry about the edges because that's it's going to be added to the feathering thing. Then I can do Command H to hide the marching ants. So when I go filter, blur, and Gaussian blur, whatever application I do, if I want to increase or decrease it, I can see it blending with everything else without the marching ants getting in the way. Like I may want to decrease this number here, so it's not so high. Why? I don't know. Just because I feel like doing it. Because I feel that it doesn't need to be as high. Everything kind of blends in smoothly together with each other. It's kind of a cool thing. You hit OK, you get out of that dialog box, and you can do Control H or Command H again, bring the marching ants back up before you move on to the next one. If you forget that keyboard shortcut under View, you'll see where it says Extras. It'll be checked on, and see Controller Command H will uncheck it. Basically, what Extras is all these things under Show, under the Show section right underneath there. These are the things that it's turning off. It's turning on and off. So it's a way to kind of do that real fast, with that Extras being on or being off. If you do Command H to turn the extras off and you don't turn them back on, the next selection that you make, you'll see yourself making the selection, but as soon as you let go of your mouse, the marching ants may disappear on you because that's just because you turned off the extras. If they still stay and show up there, that's cool too. If you get into your filter menu and you go to the blur and you go to the Gaussian blur and you forgot to hide the extras, you can still do Controller Command H, even though this filter is open. This filter application is open. So this way you could still apply it without getting in and out of that filter. You can still apply the filter and still be able to hide the marching ants when you don't need to see them. And you just keep doing this process over and over across the different areas of your subject. Try not to touch the hair. Try not to touch the areas that are sharp or supposed to be sharp with doing this. Also, one other trick, and I haven't used this for so long, so I hope it works. If you look up at the top of your filter menu, the last filter that you applied is going to show up as up here at the top. Now, the idea of it, there used to be a keyboard shortcut. I don't see it listed anymore of Control F or Command F and maybe the Shift key. So Shift Control F or Shift Command F would open that same filter up again so you can apply it again. So this way I don't have to go all the way to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I can just go here to the filter menu and choose Gaussian blur up here. And it's just going to apply that Gaussian blur filter, the one I applied. It applies it right there immediately. And let's see about the Shift Command version. So let's go Shift Command F. No, don't get anything. So that keyboard shortcut's not assigned anymore. But that used to be a real cool little trick to do. So you just go back up here to filter and whatever the last Gaussian blur, looks like the last three filters that you applied with their settings, you can apply them to a different area without having to go back into that filter to reapply with a different number with the same numbers. If you want different number values, then you're going to have to go through the manual way of doing it. Yeah, that's there. Okay. I think that's it. So when you're finished with this high frequency separation, your picture should look smoother than the original did in those different areas of color. If you turn the visibility of that group on and off, it should turn off those two layers so you can see that you still have the same basically sharp picture, but the skin is smoothed out. The texture of the skin is still there though. That's the other thing I want to bring up. If I zoom in closer to her face, the skin texture is still there. It hasn't been blurred out at all, um, which is the important part. So her skin texture that she originally had is still there. Things like I'll use this little blemish right here as the example. If there's areas like that that need to be fixed, what you would do is you would go into this high frequency uh, layer here and double click on it to get to the original picture. All right. And this is where you would go and apply any, like, I don't know. Let's do the spot healing brush because that's probably going to be the fastest for something like that little bit of a blemish. So this little bitty blemish right here that my cursor is on top of, if I click, yeah, with the spot healing brush, see, it just takes that away. And so now that little bit of a blemish is gone. Now, if I take this PSB file that opened up and I save and close it, so save, then I can just hit the X there to close it, and it'll close when it's done saving. So it's going to take a second for it to save for me. But when it is done, as I zoom in, see that little blemish is gone now in that high frequency layer. The blemish is gone. So now I can go in and I can go to, fix anything that I see as a blemish or an ear, any type of blemish or acne bump or anything like that. The smart object must be rest or at Y. Cancel that. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to zoom out. What are you doing, my guy? Okay. I hit some keyboard shortcut the wrong way. So now I can go in to that high frequency layer, do any of my photo retouching things. I could do some color corrective things if I need to do, anything like that, like color her hair or something like that. I can add multiple layers inside of that high frequency, smart object and save, close it, and everything would translate back over here. So it's kind of a cool thing to be able to do this. Do you have to do it on every picture? No, because the steps that are involved, it would take you some time to do it. And it takes you some practice to find a number that settles down that you can work with on that picture, depending on which picture it is. So, but the rules are high resolution image that's at a pretty good size. So if you look at any of those pictures from Pexels or Unsplash or Photopea or any of those other ones that have high resolution images, you should be able to download that, go into your image size, and see that the resolution is a high number, somewhere around the 300s, around 300 or 150 to 300. If it is a low number, the pixel amount, width and height wise, should be well over 3,000. So sometimes that's the trade off that happens. They make the resolution at a low number, 72, 150, 96 pixels per inch, something like that. But the width and height is like 6 or 8,000 pixels wide or tall, for that picture. And that's kind of the trade off with their camera or with their system. And then you can go in and kind of fix for that. And I talked about that last week, as a matter of fact. With being able to adjust that under image size, being able to turn off the resample image part, and then be able to change that that resolution and that sort of thing, so you can get something like this to happen. All right, so that's high frequency separation. I think that's it with that one. Again, like I said, it's kind of involved, but it is kind of fun. The last thing I'm going to show you, hopefully I can show you, it may crash my computer because my computer on this nice hot day is acting very slow. But I want to see if I can actually show you this. There are things called neural filters. So inside of that photo retouch folder, there's these two pictures. One is called family, the other one's called dad. Any one of these you can open up for this process. Old photos, you need to do some photo restoration. How do you go about fixing for this type of thing? So old days. Um, to neutralize this gray that's going on, it would probably be using the levels adjustments as an adjustment layer. And in that adjustment layer, I can, because it's a color picture, it's in color, but because it's going with the highlights, middle tones, and shadows, I can take this highlight slider and move it towards the beginning of the histogram that's showing up. That gets rid of that darkness that was going on, and kind of brightens the picture up a bit. Makes it look a little bit brighter. If it's a little too much, I may go back the other way and kind of try to balance and even it out, so that way you get a better shot of grandpa and mom and your uncles and aunts or whatever in front of the Christmas tree and that sort of thing. But that's one step, and that is probably the first step that you would do, and that works out pretty well. As far as color goes, though, this is where things can get bad, because trying to simulate the color that should be there has always been difficult without having a reference point of what colors should be here within this picture. You're pretty much just kind of sepia toning the whole thing. You're just putting a color tone on it, or you can go in with different layers and kind of paint over like the couch and the tree and the blinds and the people and that sort of thing, and try to get it. This picture on purpose is like a lower, it's only 200 pixel per inch, and the size is not that big, on purpose, just to give you something to work off of. But usually old photos, if you're scanning them or taking them with a camera, you want to make sure it's at the highest resolution possible for that device and the largest size you could possibly get out of that device when you're scanning it or taking pictures with a digital camera or something like that. So that way you got more information to be able to push and pull around. So if I was really doing this, I would have taken this photo with my scanner, scanned it at well over 300, 600, 900 pixel per inch, made sure it was, super huge in pixels, like that 8,000 or 6,000 at 300 or 600 pixels per inch. That would have been a huge picture, large in file size, heavy to work off of, but worth it in order to restore the photo to back to where it was. The problem is you wouldn't be able to get the colors right. That's always going to be the issue. So now, how can we achieve that? Is there a way to achieve that here? Short answer is yes, but it's a process. And this is the part that can kind of crash things out. So after you get the color, balanced out, so that was just a black and white, which was the color with the level adjustment. I want to select both of these layers, and I'm going to try to right click on them and convert to a smart object. Converting it to a smart object will let me get back into the original, two layers in case I need to for anything like fixing the levels adjustment or anything like that. So that's the purpose of being able to do that. The name, because they used levels 1 for whatever reason, I'm going to change the name to just Dad at Christmas. And now we're going to apply a filter that, because we made this a protected layer, we're going to apply a filter in a non-destructive way that could possibly restore the color here. So after you get everything balanced out, then you want to go after this. It's called a neural filter. Neural filters are, before the AI craze came about, neural filters was Adobe's jump into their version of AI, where they can use the artificial intelligence power that's built into your operating system, possibly built into the internet as well. Now it's been updated to include the AI usage to do some very cool and magical things without you having to do a lot of work. The problem with these neural filters, as you can see right now, they take a long time to load no matter how good your computer is. And once they load in, that you could see what the different neural filters are, smart skin smoothing, smart portrait, which is makeup transfer, landscape mixer, all these other ones. The one we're going to use is called colorize. If you haven't used these yet, you actually have to not only select it, but you have to turn it on. And turning it on with this little toggle here will require you to download it. And so you have to, if you look down at the bottom of the screen there, it takes a while to process this because this is using not only your computer, if you're connected to the internet while you're doing it, it's also using the power of the internet to try to download, install, and then process whatever it is you're trying to do. So work slow, be aware of what you're doing, and just take your time with this. You check on colorize, it processes, it installs itself, and then it's going to give you some options to go for. Different profiles that you can come up with and see what works. And I wish they would note these a little bit better than just retro this, retro that. Um, the names are kind of weird, but when you apply it and let it process, you can see what it's going to do. And no one of these is any better than another. It's just trying to see what give you the best results from the original and give you kind of the best kind of colors to go along with. Um, and you're not done because you'll have sliders that will deal with the profile that you apply, the strength of it, the saturation, and then the different color differences, cyan to red, magenta to green, yellow to blue. If you remember in our color class that we taught, those are the opposites of the two colors. And then color artifact reduction. Bad picture. A lot of times the pictures are not going to be in focus and nice, and they'll be blurry and stuff like that. This will try to reduce some of the color noise that may happen. So you want to apply some of this. How much of it? Again, it just depends because you have these levels of noise, color-based noise, and then the film-based noise. The graininess of the film and such will cause noise, and you probably want to reduce it a little bit, if not completely, based on whatever you pick for these different options. Nothing is perfect, but this is a real good start. Um, can you use these different things in combination? Yeah, you can, because besides this, with the colorize, there is photo restoration. This one has been in beta mode forever, but photo restoration, see if I can turn this one on without things dying on me. This will sometimes help restore the old photos too, get rid of dust and scratches and the blurriness of the picture, try to restore as much of the original picture as possible. When you have more than one of these neural filters on the same image, it's going to take a minute for it to apply. If you decide from here with the neural filter, you like what you got created, down at the bottom, it's going to ask you what the output is before you hit OK. And the output should always be Smart Filter because you're applying it to one of those protected layers. So Smart Filter is going to be the best choice to use. After this processes, after you set up all the different options and everything is the way it is, you like, you don't like, you're cool, you're ready to move forward. You hit OK. It should get you out of the neural filters. And I'm pausing because every time I'm pausing, I'm praying that this thing doesn't crash. But at any point in time, with all of those steps that you take within the neural filter interface, things can hang up, things could, you may have to restart your computer or restart the program, or restart using the file or anything like that in order to get things back. So it's a good idea that if you're going to apply the neural filters, wait until you're almost finished with everything else that you got to do, and then go apply the neural filter and see what you get. Or if you know that you have other steps that you need to take, you like what happened with the neural filter, turn the visibility of that layer off, do any of the other things that you need to do, knowing that when you turn the neural filter on, you can see what the final result is going to be. Just so your computer doesn't slow down to the point where it crashes or stops on you. And immediately save. Like, before you do anything else, when you get out of the neural filters, go to File, go to Save or Save As, save this on your desktop or wherever you need to save it in order to get the, make sure that this is actually going to be kept. Because, yeah, I've gone through using these neural filters to do photo restoration and that sort of thing on pictures, and I lose the whole thing. And I am livid. It just makes me supremely angry because of it. Saving to your creative cloud is one of the things that this neural filters is good. Um, has a good use for because again, the neural filters are pulling from information off your internet. So whatever your internet connection is going to factor into the speed of this and its execution. So if you have it saved on your cloud account, it does kind of speed up the process more. Updates and everything happen, for the neural filter pretty quickly. If any, there's updates that need to happen, it'll happen and update things. Um, with you saving to your Creative Cloud, it will do an automatic save for you every time. So that way you don't have to do the save. It'll just do it for you. But you still want to save as often as you can when you're applying this. And I don't know what's happening now. It's like it's caught in a infernal loop. Told it to save to the cloud, and now it keeps popping up like you can't do it, but it's not showing me anything that shows as an error. Okay, I'm gonna stop doing that. I'm just gonna hit cancel. Something's going on with it trying to save, but I don't know what it is, and I'm not gonna try. Figure it out right now. Okay, so that's the neural filter. That's the last thing I want to show you. It's part of the photo retouching thing because of that photo restoration, but there's a lot of different options in there. Explore it if you have the chance. If you come to the lab, to our open lab days, you could check them out. The neural filters there on a computer that's pretty speedy, and that should work. Oh, the thing about Open Lab this Friday. This Friday, the CAB campus is going to be closed. All faculty and staff have to go and have a big powwow somewhere else. So the DeKalb campus is going to be closed for that day. Those of you living in Newton County or Rockdale County or anywhere surrounding areas, if you want to come out there at the Newton County campus, we are having a campus day. Basically, we're showcasing all the programs and what we have to offer. It's a good chance for you, current students, to come out and meet some of the potential new students and tell them about your life here in GPTC. Also, it's a chance for you to talk to other teachers about their different programs. Maybe you want to transfer programs. Maybe when you're done with our program, with that you're doing, that you're graduating from, maybe you want to start up a different program. So it's a chance for you to do that sort of thing. And it's a chance for me to meet y'all because I haven't seen a majority of y'all in class yet. So it's a chance for everybody to kind of meet each other and commiserate. So I suggest that you come out there to have some fun. Thank y'all for coming through to the end of this, and I will see y'all at a later date, and we'll get in and talking about some other things. Have fun with everything.